Christine, Charles, and Owen, welcome and many thanks for joining us today. The built environment plays an important role in the circular economy, and its importance cannot be underestimated. As one of the leading sectors for resource use and carbon emissions, the built environment has the opportunity to scale a circular economy. Without further notice, let us start with setting the context for the discussion today. So I would ask you to briefly introduce your organization, the mission behind it, and then how you engage with your members and your clients. Christine, shall we start with you?
Yeah, happy to.
DGNB, please. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. DGNB is the German Sustainable Building Council. We're basically the Green Building Council in Germany. We have around 1,700 member organizations through the whole value chain. So it goes from one-person architectural firms all the way to big corporations. And I always say our goal is to save the world. In the built environment, it's a big goal. And how do we do that? Our key tool is basically a certification system, because I think the challenge, I mean, you already know the big opportunities we have and the big numbers, but I think the very big challenge we're facing is that we have a very diverse value chain when it comes to buildings and to design buildings, and we have these very long time frames, so we never have all the actors on one table. So this is where we decided 2007 we're going to establish a certification system that basically defines goals and is really a practical tool for this transformation, so everyone who's involved knows what we're talking about and where to go to. And we're almost close to 10,000 certificates we've issued. We're working internationally as well, and we do a lot of education. We've trained already more than 5,000 people around certification, around life cycle analysis, and all these things, because we're a big believer in, you need to measure, you need to fact-based solutions instead of having this gut feeling what we think might be good. So, yeah, very, very active and very dynamic organization.
Thank you. Owen, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Owen. I come from JLL, and we're a services agency. We're a global services agency, probably most well known as a brokerage firm, but we do a number of things in addition to that. So globally, we have about 95,000 people that work at the firm, active in just about all the markets that you can think of, with the exception of an obvious few. You can really split our business into two areas. We have a section of the organization that works with investors, owners, developers, and then we have another section that works with corporate occupiers. And we handle any type of activity that they might want or need from both sides, and oftentimes integrate both of those sides as well. So everything from strategy formation to realization, search and secure of new property, new portfolios, new assets, the design and build of those structures and interiors, and then also, which is quite powerful for us, is the ongoing operations. We have a large facility management arm which works with our corporates and owners to manage those properties, which also provides us a great wealth of data and information about not just what are we looking at on the front end, but in practice and in reality, how is this shaping up in their property.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Charles Van Thiel from GRES, and GRES is probably not a very common organization, so I might explain a little bit what we do. GRES used to mean Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, but it's not an acronym anymore, simply because we've expanded our activities now to cover also infrastructure assets. So now we call ourselves an ESG benchmark for real asset. And the way, about 12, 13 years ago, some large pension funds sat down together and thought, we need a system to collect ESG information from our investees in a structured and streamlined way. At the moment, we're sending out questionnaires, sending out different lists of requirements, and all these different questions came from different investors to different investees, and that created a lot of unstructured information around ESG. And so they sat down and thought, well, let's just do a project. Let's establish a platform online allowing investee, so companies and funds and assets, to log in and to fill in a lot of questions that is well defined by GRESB and that goes straight into the investment community. And so it started with 150 companies back then, and today we've reached more than 3,000-4,000 organizations, and we cover about, on the real estate side, because I'm part of the real estate side of the business, we cover about between 30 and 40% of the markets, of the commercial real estate markets. And the way we work is that every year these large real estate companies, funds, or infrastructure, as I said, we expand activities, infrastructure, asset and funds, log onto a platform, and they complete all these questions. And then at the end of the process, we benchmark them against their peers. But then we also take that information and then we provide it back to the investors. So, the drivers of GRESB initially were, as I said, pension funds at the beginning. Now it expanded to, banks, insurance, also sovereign funds, but mainly the institutional investment community. And we provide them with that information in a structured way. And they can also rely on it because it's going through the GRESB platform where we also add some validation layers, some review layers, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. And thanks for setting the context within the organizations. Like we were discussing earlier today, despite where you work and which type of products you work, eventually everyone uses buildings, and that's how it's so important for us to be here today. So what I heard from this brief introduction, I heard data, I heard certification, I heard strategy, I heard growth between the lines, I'd say. Owen, if we start with JLL, can you share some details how you are addressing circularity within the organization, and what are the, I would say, mainly challenges you experience and probably biggest opportunities?
Yeah, so addressing sustainability on a number of levels is front and center in the business right now. So we've taken an all-in position on embedding it deeply across the entire service platform, as well as all of our verticals that are helping all of our customers. Right now, what we've really stated is that we shape the future of real estate for a better world. That's really our mission and objective. It's clear. We receive fantastic training from the business on an ongoing basis. So that's part of one is education. That's how we're driving this to all of our 95,000 people so that everybody is marching in the same direction. To help our clients, we see that the question and the demand coming from the market is increasing dramatically. And in some areas, we need to catch up and enhance and improve our capabilities to actually meet them at their point of question. In other areas, JLL is on the front end and really looking to pull the industry forward. So we sit as a services agency, we sit in the conversation between multiple actors, and we help them to broker their next step in real estate, how they grow, how they contract, where they want to be, where they want to divest from, and with that comes a whole host of opportunities to help navigate the conversation towards let's make sure that we're doing this in a responsible manner. So what we do from a perspective of the organization is that we make sure that we have a fully integrated approach and that we have a number of specialists in conversations with different groups. So if you're going to speak to a portfolio owner, for example, we want to have strategists, we want to have brokers, we want to have development specialists in there and ESG specialists in there so that we can have this total conversation with them about, okay, what does your future look like? I would say some of the challenges that we're really facing right now is because we're a global organization, we see this on a global level. So a number of the companies that we work with are not just looking at, what does my building look like in Amsterdam or The Hague? We're saying, okay, how do my 60 buildings across Europe and 85 worldwide, how are they looking? So what we see is those breakpoints in uniformity between how data transfers. I think GRESB has done a great job of helping to close some of those gaps, as have our green building agencies as well. From our corporate occupier standpoint, one of the big challenges is, okay, how do I create commonalities between my portfolio, measure my KPIs, and report out in a consistent and verifiable way, when regulation in different countries, let alone different regions, is vastly different. And that has much to do with the pace of change. So, I mean, we see a lot of governments going in the right direction, and that's great, but they're at their own time of doing that. So how do we navigate these different markets where some are ahead, some are behind? And that's a big challenge that we see. The second is really, again, commonality. I would say internally, if we looked in the mirror and across our industry, is on valuation. So having a common sort of set of tools of how we value property in a way that really captures the benefits of circularity. So I think that we valued property in the same way for quite some time, and now only recently are we really understanding and getting the data back from our institutional investors saying, no, we want property to also incorporate these risks or challenges within them that are going to impact how you value that.
Thank you. I don't know, Christine, Charles, you want to add something on the challenges and opportunities?
Maybe one thing that you said that I found interesting is when you said a company, wants to know what their building look like. Even this question is a challenge on its own, and I can talk a little bit more about this. Is what does that mean? Looking like, like you mentioned KPIs. What is a good KPI? Like let's assume that the data is here and we have, good intensity values or whatever the metrics are. How do you assess it? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it so intertwined with so many factors that are, geography specific, but also asset specific, such as, vacancy rate or number of operational hours in an office building, if you have 2 shifts in an office building compared to an office building with 1 shift, obviously you're going to have a higher consumption and emissions. But it doesn't mean that the building doesn't operate well. It just means that it operates differently. And so it's really, really difficult to assess how, we're talking about real estate, right? How a piece of real estate performs in the first place. And that's why sometimes, cross-regional, cross-sector comparison sometimes is not even feasible.
Like you said, things have been evolved. I mean, the DGNB is now turning 15 years this year. And when I remember in 2009, when we launched the system, we introduced life cycle analysis. I presented, it was one of my first business trips, was to Brussels to present the DGNB system to a group from the Commission. And they were basically laughing at me, like the German nerd, here doing an LCA of a building. How should we do and where should the data come from? Now everyone talks about life cycle analysis, which is good. But so I think, talking about this, I don't know, I think looking at how our world has evolved and where we are at the moment, I don't think these things are so complicated. I think we're facing the challenge that in the built environment, we have a big part of the actors who've just been waiting. And they haven't done their job. They haven't done their homework. The target is 0 emission in operation. The target is reducing embodied carbon as quickly and as fast as we can. And I think circularity is their very important strategy to get there. So I think we really have to make as well that turn. And I think we have to simplify things. And that is, for us, is a key work of what we do. I always say we demystify things. But what we need is we need to reach these people being out there, doing projects, being on the construction side, being on day one over budget and behind the time. And we have to make it for them practical and really feasible. And this is what we try with our certification, because I think it's not always the goal that everyone knows everything and kind of always has the perfect solution. It's that every actor, everyone does in their space of responsibility the maximum they can do, and they know what to do, and to be very pragmatic. So what we did about talking about circularity in 2018, we introduced it in the DGNB system, new construction, with circular economy boni. The challenge in the building industry why we're not more circular is basically it comes down to infrastructure. So we developed 2 years ago, we started to develop a deconstruction certificate. Because we said, everyone talks about circularity, but how does it really work? How does it really work when you look at these big buildings out there? In Europe, we have a challenge of renovation. So we're doing deconstruction completely or partly every day. So we said, let's develop a certificate for that and start working with the deconstruction companies, with the companies who do that every day, who have the technical knowledge. I think we need as well to close the loop of knowledge. So we have to bring different actors to the table. I think when we talk about circularity, it's a very local business. We have to, it's not global. We're not going to save it globally because then you have all the emissions from the transport. So it is something very regional. And I think there we need to talk to different actors. We need to talk to municipalities, to decision makers, and as well educate the public.
Thank you, Christine. And one of the reasons why we are here today is we all are part of this cradle-to-cradle certified community, and some of you working very close with the program as well. You mentioned the certification, you mentioned the need to expand your certification to different areas in the built environment to be really clear or scale that. If we think about cradle-to-cradle certified, how do you see that an holistic framework can help accelerating the circular economy agenda? Do you want to share that?
Well, I think every good building starts and ends with good and healthy materials. I think a building is a sum of different materials. So I think we have a right to have good materials, to have healthy materials and safe materials. And a lot of problems we're dealing with today, the challenges in the built environment, they come from that we didn't emphasize that, and that we didn't implement that understanding that we have a right for good materials, that there's a responsibility on what happens at the end of the life cycle or the user case of a building with the materials. So I think we see that a product certification is a very powerful tool to make it feasible and to make it easy, because we need to be quick. We cannot make this research with everyone, and we as well need, I think especially, and there's the value of a certification. When we talk about time, it can address the people who don't have time, but then they know, okay, this is the safe choice for me, or that is the choice that works in this building, in this goal we're having.
I would share Christine's view that really materials is a very, very powerful way to have the conversation with our clients. So, I mean, essentially when we come down to assessing, where are you going to be from either a building or a portfolio level, materials is always a way that we can bring the conversation from a theoretical or conceptual way and have really kind of practical conversations with them about, okay, what are you going to put in front of the people that work in your company? And what are they going to be exposed to on a daily basis when they come to work? And did they sign up for, being exposed to some of these things that we're talking about putting in front of them? Well, no, let's start then defining healthy products that we can use in their building. So from the material standpoint, it really is a place that helps us to have a much more meaningful and practical conversation with our clients. And from the other side as well, too, I think that what we see as an organization is we do have accounts with companies that we handle globally. One of them actually is L'Oreal, and I think we'll hear from L'Oreal later today, and that they've done such fantastic work in embedding cradle to cradle in the products that they put in front of their consumers. Is that the conversation that we had with them from real estate was, okay, how is this translating into the property that you're being housed in? And when they came up for a moment of lease about 2 years ago, we actually ended up moving them into Park 2020, which is a construction site in a office park where circularity and cradle to cradle is front and center of how that place is constructed. And now what they're sharing back with us from a leadership and from actually an employee standpoint is that they feel much more connected to the mission and purpose in what they're doing. So I think in that manner as well, we're able to then look at how these companies themselves are really translating from the work that they're doing on a consumer and a product basis into their own property. And so I think that that's an opportunity that we can scale on a portfolio level to help them make better decisions on housing in the future.
Thank you. We hear several times from the sector and also here today that we need clarity of what is sustainable, what is circular, what needs to be better informed and help investors to make better choices. Charles, what does it mean for GRESB, an organization that has a mission is to provide transparent ESG data to financial markets, this new EU taxonomy for for your work, but also for the stakeholders that works with you. Do you see it as a way to shape the construction industry as well?
Specifically the EU taxonomy?
Yeah.
At GRES, we've addressed the concept of EU regulation, first through the reporting requirements, like through SFDR in Europe, for example. Now EU taxonomy is getting more and more traction, and obviously investors want to know if they're aligned with, some criteria and some, alignment requirements, etc. But what we see here is there's some key challenges here, because if you look, I mean, I'm not going to go into the details, but if you look at some of the requirements relating to the EU taxonomy, beside the need to educate more on what it means, that's the first thing, obviously. And that's what GRES can do. I mean, we do that with the GRES Foundation, which is represented by large investors and asset managers, and we decide what the industry has to report on in order to, for that data to be scaled up back to the investors. So that can be, education can happen relatively easily. Education obviously comes first, making sure that people understand what the requirements are, what they have to do in the first place. Now, the second big challenge that we see is, even if they assume they understand it, they actually have to report on some of these data points. And these data points aren't even collected in the first place. Assuming the data point is here, now obviously GRES can help and aggregate it, validate it, guide, because there's a lot of guidance sometimes needed.
I have to say, I think the taxonomy is a very powerful tool that evolves very quickly. And that, again, is not something that happened overnight. Paragraph 8 of the Paris Agreement is sustainable finance. So 2015, the world agreed on providing financial aid or streaming the money in a way that we basically work more sustainable. And then the Commission took it up in a very high-speed process, which I think everyone was surprised with, because the other commissions, more on the environmental side, they don't work as quickly as the finance sector was able to do something. And sure, the criteria are not perfect, but I think in the end, the train is moving. And like you said, I mean, I think one thing is we need the information and we need the data. And that is something where part of the industry has just waited too long, and now they have to do their homework. And that is just how it is. And I think the taxonomy shows that there's no way around the building level. And I had these discussions for many, many years, and I think the taxonomy is a very powerful push, because we talk to a lot of banks, to insurance companies, and they're all now starting to screen whether the buildings are in line with the taxonomy, which is out at the moment. Now we're starting a market test on the taxonomy criteria for circularity, which were just published a few weeks ago. But we did a marketability study on the first criteria when they were launched 2 years ago, almost, with 60 European buildings. And we basically showed it works. It works if you have the data. It always comes down to the data. And if you have a certified building, it was actually something of 2 or 3 hours of work to see where do I stand in the taxonomy. I really believe that the taxonomy is a very powerful common language, finally, to bring all these worlds together, that the finance sector, the technical level we're coming maybe from, the real estate sector, are finally to start to talk about the same things that will generate a certain kind of transparency, which I know is very scary for some, has a lot of potential to devalue buildings overnight very quickly. But in the end, the goals are clear. And I think we just have to find then different measures on how to get there.
The common language is the point that I want to pick up and carry forward, because with a common language, we're actually seeing the opportunity for more efficient markets, because people are actually starting to work with the same reporting techniques and data, and they have the common tools of which they're saying, okay, this constitutes sustainable property and this doesn't. And I think that when we look out there, when we read in the papers, we see these massive institutional investors that just seem to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But let's not forget that a large portion of the marketplace is family-owned family-owned investment agencies or smaller brokerage houses, and they have oftentimes been challenged by, where do I start? How do I get going? How do I keep pace with these larger organizations that are working at scale? And this common language is going to help them to level the playing field for them to get up quicker as well, too.
Just as a closing up, What can we expect from each of your organizations in terms of circularity for the next coming months, years? If very short sentence, just as a kind of wrap up from today's session.
We're going to really push for climate neutrality, for circularity, for healthy materials. We're going to launch in a few weeks a climate package on top of all the certifications we have. In line with the IPCC report that came out in February, we were developing a version 2030.
On my side, very much what I mentioned a little bit earlier already, addressing key issues such as things like embodied carbon, which aren't addressed sufficiently in our GRESB standards. That's been done through also establishment of the GRESB Foundation to make sure that these issues are driven by the industry itself, not by GRESB, me sitting in a room thinking we should do this. It's not the case, it's like industry driven. And definitely leveraging on existing frameworks that have done the job, that have the knowledge, and that we shouldn't just reinvent the wheel. We should just leverage on existing, robust frameworks and drive the industry forward based on those. So engagement will be a key pillar for us going forward. Yeah.
From JLL side, I think we have, in one word, is going to be action. So we've made some very large commitments as an organization to science-based targets and net zero. As a corporation as a whole, that's all 95,000 people. On a daily basis, several million people walk through a JLL managed property, and we have a wonderful opportunity to positively impact their lives. So we've made those commitments, and from our standpoint now, it's about backing that up, and we will achieve those targets. We have the whole organization going forward for that. So from our standpoint, it's about growth, it's about scale, it's about meaningful investments in our business on the front of circularity and on achieving net zero.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna.